878-5104. We're normally here with our in-studio audience of one, Norm Carter, but he's away on family business, and we'll catch up with him on Monday. But we do have our 21st century citizen with us who enables us to do the live streaming of the program, Willie H. Welcome, Willie.
Welcome to Living for the People with L. Nathan Hare.
You all just don't know the magic stuff that he does with these electrical devices is just way beyond my ken. I was born too early to learn that stuff.
Well, I don't know if you know, but I worked Taiwan and Cable Studio for 20 years.
No
I
kidding.
was in big studio with lights and everything.
So were they still using wheelbarrows to get? Never mind. So I want to take today's program, and I'm going to talk about an issue from two sides. I'm going to talk about what happened with this challenge to our finance system that we're still under threat under as we speak. But I want to help us understand how that came about, why that occurred, so that we at least have the right understanding in our own minds about what drove the crisis, and then what kinds of decisions or different policies or different programs may need to be created to address that crisis so it doesn't happen that way again.
Mr. Hare, I just want to ask you, how long was the crisis, or what's the time period?
Well, we're still on it. So the Silicon Valley Bank went under, I think it was 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
And now they're calling it a bailout. They didn't actually bail it out in the sense of taking taxpayer money and putting the money into the bank and making the stockholders whole at Silicon Valley. What they did is they took fees that the bank normally would be paying to cover federal deposit insurance, a corporation requirements, fees that the company would be paying to place monies at the Central Reserve Bank, or a regional reserve bank. They're taking that money and using that money to be able to float the equity of the bank until the panic, from the depositors begins to run its course, and you're not getting so much demand for people pulling money out of the bank.
Right.
As that occurs, and the bank is earning money from interest returns on the investments the bank is making with your money.
Right.
Write that down. The bank is investing your money.
Right.
And the interest returns become the profit that the banks make off of investing your money.
Right. I hate to interrupt again, but Mr. Hare, didn't some years ago they gave money to the banks? A lot of the banks?
They did. That was in the 2008, 2009 Great Recession, and they literally bailed banks out. They gave them no interest loans that they were able to, over a period of time, essentially have those loans forgiven. Mm-hmm. So you had tens of billions of dollars, put into Lehman Brothers and Sachs, and these J.P. Morgan, these great big banks that had gone under or were going under, and to keep those banks from crashing completely, they put federal money, basically our public tax dollars, they put them into those banks to keep those banks liquid, until their investments began to catch up. Is that the right one? Yeah, their investment returns began to catch up with their expenses. Once that occurred, then the bank stabilized, and they were able to go on without any more help from that point on. But when I say any more help, they still put tens of billions of dollars into the banks as no interest loans, and then gave them a protocol that over a period of time, if they did certain steps the way that the federal government wanted them done, they would forgive the loans. So for all intents and purposes, these were grants that were given to these banks.
Right, that they didn't have to pay back.
And those grants were from your money.
I know.
Not from their money. That was from your money.
Mr. Hare, is there an average of how much those banks might have gotten? Is there a guess or there's no
I really can't
guesstimation?
give you a good guess on that, but I would say if you were talking about a bank the size of, say, M&T Bank, which is a regional bank,
Right.
you were probably talking about something in the area of $10 or $15 billion that would have gone to, that kind of money. Well, remember now, $1 billion sounds like it's a lot of money, but if you're in Baltimore, you're in Cleveland, you're in
you only
Buffalo,
get a bit of that.
Think about how many people make up those population centers. Right. That might be 50 million people in those population centers. Right. So 50 million people at say $20 a piece, would be $1 billion, right?
Gotcha.
So $20 for a bank deposit is not a whole lot of money, right?
Not a lot.
Because there's the economy of scale, right?
Right. I got you now.
So I went to an article written by Adam Barone and Summer Anderson, and it was entitled Bank Reserves, Definition, Purpose, Types, and Requirements. This was in Investopedia. And I just went to this to help us understand the mechanics of what was going on. Because a lot of us don't really know what banks actually do. I mean, we know we put money into banks, and the only mechanics that we know is when I put money in the bank, when I want the money out, I need to be able to go get the money out. Yeah. And I don't want anybody to give me any
money.
Yeah, don't give me any stuff. I don't want an excuse.
Right.
I don't want to have to go down the street. I don't have to call the Federal Reserve.
Right.
I just want to get my money right now.
I just want to get my money.
That's the mechanics. So bank reserves are the cash minimums that financial institutions must have on hand in order to meet central bank requirements. This is important now. This is real paper money that must be kept by the bank in a vault on site or held in the bank's account at the central bank.
Liquid.
That's the liquid money.
Yeah.
That money's not tied up in any investments. That money is just, you put the money in. We were talking about this on the way down. For all intents and purposes, the bank is the mattress that you used to save your money under.
Right.
Well, you didn't do that.
My father would put
your father and your grandfather,
and
right?
Suits and
that's
coats
right.
And coats and all
that's right. Okay.
And then mom would find it and she'll have a bowl.
and mom would have the shotgun next to her. Don't mess with my money, okay?
That's right.
Go down the street and rob somebody else. Don't mess with my money, right?
Yep.
So in the United States, the cash reserves requirements are intended to ensure that every bank can meet any large and unexpected demand for withdrawals. So unexpected demands for withdrawals could happen with, let's say, you have a massive flood and you're not going to be able to stay, in your area for a period of time, like they're having in California right now. So you would need money, right? So maybe you don't feel confident, just opening up a bank in a different area that you've never been to before, opening up a bank in that account in that area. So you want your money in cash and then take your cash with you so that, if you got to operate out of a hotel, you got to, maybe get a room with somebody, and so on, you got some liquidity for you to be able to make those kind of moves. So people, any number of reasons can cause people to make a large demand for cash drawn out of their bank accounts. So the Federal Reserve dictates the amount of cash that the bank has to have on hand in what they refer to as a reserve ratio. That's the amount of money each bank must historically maintain on hand. Now, of course, me and my, naive self, I thought, well, if they have a reserve ratio that says, here's the amount of money that, or percentage of the deposits that the bank must keep in cash on hand in a vault or in an accessible central bank, then there must be a rule on that, right? There must be some requirement. So I went to check out on the requirements, and what I found is that the reserve ratio can be anywhere from 0 to 10% of the depositor's funds. So if it's 0, what if there's a run on the bank and you only have 0, cash on hand? That's how these runs on banks get started, for just that reason. Now they could do that if they've got money in a central Federal Reserve Bank, let's say there's a Federal Reserve Bank in Buffalo. You live in Rochester. Maybe there's no Federal Reserve Bank in Rochester, but you're banking at, say, M&T Bank in Rochester. If they didn't have any liquid money on hand, but you made a demand for turning your deposits into cash, they could call on the central bank and say to the central bank, Nate wants another, $1,000 of his money. Can you all run that money out to him? And then you'd see somebody in a Brinks truck, coming out to bring that money to, Rochester,
Right.
so that customer could get paid. So that's the system that's set up. Bank reserves are the minimal amounts of money that banks are supposed to keep on hand. But I need for you to understand that in the United States, the policy is you could have zero in your Federal Reserve. There's no requirement that you have a specific amount of money in your Federal Reserve unless your bank was organized that way and it's written in your bank charter that you have to have X amount of your money in cash on hand. Now, why is that an issue? Because banks make their money by selling your money to other people.
Right.
So if they got money sitting in a vault, in drawers or in bags, in a vault inside the bank, it's not earning any interest. It's just earning dust, right?
Right.
So if it's not earning interest, that means the stockholders who own the bank, they have an asset, your money, that's not making any money for the stockholders.
Right.
So they're putting pressure on the, president of the bank and the vice president of the bank, or whoever the people are that run, the bank. What are you guys doing? Invest my money,
Right.
get me more money, and so on, right? So that's what you have a conflict of interest. You as a bank depositor, your interest is in ensuring that if you give money to the bank, it's like the mattress. You go and look under your mattress and the money is still there. Right? So your interest is in preserving and guaranteeing that your capital stays intact.
Right.
And the banks only give you 1/8% or something like that interest rate, on your, they give you almost nothing in terms of interest rate on your money. They probably charge you more than you get in interest return because you pay for your checks. You pay for, I guess when a check is cashed, unless you have a no-fee account, you're paying for each check that gets cashed. It might be just 20 cents, but whatever it is, you're paying for it. So excess reserves are the additional cash that a bank keeps on hand and doesn't actually lend out. Now, you might say, well, why would they have cash on hand they don't lend out? Well, you could have treasury bonds, that you had purchased that had, say, a guaranteed tax-free interest rate, on those treasury bonds. They mature. They hit their the date when, let's say it's a 1-year bond. In a year from now, that bond will mature and pay out the principal plus the interest that was promised on that treasury bond. Well, that money winds up coming back into your bank, and it sits in your bank vault until you reinvest that money.
Right.
So part of the skill of the people that you hire to be your presidents and vice presidents and accountants that run your banks, part of their skill set is being sure that those people maximize profit opportunities for your money. So if they know that a note is gonna mature on March 24th of 2023, they want to already have set up where that money is going to get invested.
Gotcha.
Today, so it's earning money today.
Right.
So that's the way this works out. But you don't want to mess this up, because if a day comes when there's a run on the bank and people want their money, you got to have money available to pay those people. So the bank reserves are primarily an antidote to panic. The Federal Reserve obliges banks to hold on to what's supposed to be requiring banks to hold on to a certain amount of cash in reserve so that they never run short and have to refuse a customer's withdrawal, which could trigger a run on the bank.
Right.
So how do banks make their money? They make their money by renting their depositors' money to others in the form of mortgages, commercial loans, personal loans, loans to government. That's what you call treasury bonds and treasury notes. Some banks have the ability to offer credit cards, and then of course they get those exorbitant interest rates on those credit cards. You all know you pay, 20, 19, some of you paying 29%, which should be against the law, but you're paying 29% for money that you borrow on your credit card.
Yep.
Banks generally pay a low interest rates to the depositors in return for preserving the safety of their deposits. So essentially, you're paying what the bank is giving you as a value is the security of your money, that instead of having your money under your mattress, your money is physically either in the cyber world, in the ether,
right,
or it's physically in a bank vault at a central reserve that has muscular, guards all around to protect your money.
Right.
They put a premium pay a premium to the federal. The banks pay a premium to the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation to guarantee up to $250,000 of your depositor funds in a single account. If the banks could, they would invest 100% of their depositors' money in investments that pay significantly more in interest returns than the premiums and interest rates the banks pay on depositors' funds. So if they could get away with it, they would keep none of the money on hand. They would invest everything.
Right.
So what happens if a large percentage of depositors ask for their deposits back all at one time? As I indicated, banks are supposed to have, and I think the rules are, you're supposed to have enough cash on hand in your physical vaults to cover such a demand. So what happens if banks place a large percentage of their depositors' funds in one-year treasury bonds? And this is where the issue that we're talking about today comes up. This is what I'm referring to as the unintended consequences of raising the interest rates over the course of the past 12 to 14 months. So I know you are champions. Joe Biden, he's my man. If he can't do it, no one can. I get it. I really do. And I'm a fan. But sometimes people do things and there are consequences, and they have not been very muscular about dealing with the consequences. You know what I mean? You can anticipate that there's a inadvertent or unintended consequence to your action. You can anticipate that and then try to help people deal with those unintended consequences so that they're not as disruptive as they would have been if you didn't deal with them effectively.
Right.
So if the treasury bonds, as an example, are priced at 2% tax-free interest rates for your treasury notes and your treasury bonds, and let's suppose you buy a bond, before I say that, let's say that bond interest rates go up from 1% as they were in 2020. Now, this is from the article that I was reading to you from. I'm sorry, this is from the article on the 10-year treasury rate, 54-year historical chart. The rate that was being paid for treasury notes and treasury bonds in 2020 was a little bit less than 1%. I know it's hard to believe, right? They were paying like 0.89%, 0.89 hundredths of a percent. They were paying as the interest rate on a treasury note. But people were buying the treasury notes because they wanted the security of their investment. So treasury notes always get paid off.
Right.
But they got very low interest rates, in return for it, because this is a rough time, in 2020. So if you bought a treasury bond at a 1% maturity interest rate, and it had a maturity date of a year from now, and then in 2022, interest rates went up to 3% on treasury bonds and treasury notes, how would you be able to turn your previous investments in the 2% treasury bonds into money so that you could then buy 3% paying treasury bonds that are being issued right now? How could you do that? You'd have to sell the bonds you had that were paying 2%. But if you had to sell the bonds you had that were paying 2%, who's going to buy it when people can just go ahead and buy a new bond for 3% interest? Why would they bother to buy your bond at 2% interest? So that means that you got money tied up in that 2% bond that you can't turn into liquid money into usable real money until a year from now. So that means your money is illiquid for a 12-month period in the example that I'm giving.
Wow.
Yeah, that's wow. If you're a bank, now the bank may have put a lot of money into treasury bonds because they got a guaranteed interest rate, and you had the safety of it being money being sold to the federal government. So your money was going to always they're always going to pay their loans off. So you have that security, but you're getting a lower interest rate, but you're also getting tax-free interest. So that was attractive to banks. But if they're not paying attention and not recognizing that on the horizon, they're talking about the Treasury Reserve, Jerome Powell, jacking up interest rates because they're saying that that's going to reduce inflation. That's another issue. We can argue about that another day. I'm totally convinced that that's a lie. That does not reduce inflation. It actually increases inflation. But that's another story. The point I'm making is that you knew that he was going to be jacking up interest rates. And if he jacked up interest rates, if you were holding bonds that paid a lower interest rate, you got to figure out what do I have to do to be able to liquidate those bonds so that I can get into the higher paying interest rate treasury notes. What do I have to do to be able to get that done? And maybe there's not a lot you can do, but you have to keep up with it, right? So my point here is that the decision to raise interest rates meant that if the interest rates became higher than the amount of interest that were being paid on treasury notes, people would stop buying those treasury notes, and the people who held those treasury notes would not be able to turn those treasury notes into cash so that they could meet the demands of their depositors.
Right.
So it appears that the rapid increase in the Federal Reserve rate caused banks to have to hold on to their funds tied up in treasury bonds until those bonds matured in order to not lose any of the principal on those loans. This reflects an unintended consequence of the Federal Reserve's inflation reduction scheme. Companies like Silicon Valley Bank may have had too much of their depositors' money tied up in longer-term treasury bonds. You can get treasury bonds that are 10-year bonds. You get 20-year, bonds. But if you get a 20-year bond and it's at a 2% rate, and then the price that Feds start paying for money when they borrow money goes up to 4%, you got bonds that are paying 2% for 20 years. And then you could go and sell bonds, or you could buy bonds on the street for 4%,
right?
Or sell your money for 4%,
right?
So, what are your stockholders saying to you? You're getting 2%, return on all this money, and we could be getting 3 and 4 and 5% return.
Right. I get it now. So
right.
I get it now. So you go and try to get your money so that you can get that bigger interest. And that's the problem. The banks probably don't have your money.
That's the conundrum. That's the conundrum. So when the rumor mill, remember Uncle Rumor?
I don't know Uncle Rumor.
Uncle Rumor. He's the one that, you know him. When you be on your phone and you're looking at the Facebook stuff, and then Uncle Rumor shows up and he says, "Oh, by the way, Will, all that money that you had tied up in those treasury bonds,
right? Yeah.
You need to find something to do with that money because that money is going to be illiquid for at least another year,
right?
Maybe 5 years or 10 years, depending on what you bought,
right?
In the length of those treasury bonds. So the rumor mill began spreading that Silicon and other banks, Signature Bank and other banks, were nearing a stage where they didn't have enough available money to meet their depositors' withdrawal demands. Not that they didn't have money. The banks were still worth what they had been worth. It's just that they couldn't turn a lot of their money into liquid cash, so they could take advantage of the current higher interest rates. So the psychology spread that you better get your money out of those banks, before you become the one left holding the bag.
Right. I guess it's almost like going to a place to get water and they go, we got it all iced up. You're going to have to wait.
Right. Or just say you got a bag and they are paying you, say $4 for a bag, right? And you say, man, $4 for a bag, I could sell these for $5.
Right.
So you go out and you buy 100 bags. for $4. And then by the time you get to the street, get them all put up in your nice little, display cans and whatnot, they started selling the bags for $6. Right? And all of a sudden, you got bags you can't sell because you tied your money up, for the $4. You know what I mean? It's that kind of a scenario. So the crisis resulted from Silicon and other banks not anticipating that the rapid increase in Federal Reserve loan rates would result in the illiquidity of the portion of their funds that were tied up in Treasury bonds and Treasury notes, and the pressure that would produce on the availability of money to their depositors. Further, the regulations governing banks governing cash that banks needed to have on hand were so relaxed that banks could literally have no money in their vaults to meet cash demands. Now, of course, depositors could transfer money from, one bank to another bank electronically, and not have to do that with cash on hand. Right. So in today's reality, it should not be as big a problem as it seems.
Right, because a lot of our stuff is digital. You pay your bills, you use your bank, so
but clearly it got into the psychology of people. Remember, in Silicon Valley, the people who deposited money in Silicon Valley, for the most part, were not people like you and me that are depositing, $5,000, $40,000, something like that, in a bank. Right. These are people who are largely folks that are depositing millions and tens of millions of dollars
because they want that interest.
Because that's the class of people that they were marketing
and that's how they make money.
Right. And so, and because they had such large amounts of money that were being placed, in their bank, they could rent money out to a slightly lower interest rate because high volume means you get a lot more interest than you would get if you rented it at a higher interest rate, but you only were able to lend out a much smaller amount of money. Right. So if you rent out $1,000 at say 3%, you're going to get a $30 return. Right. If you rent out $10,000 at 2.5%, you're going to get $250. Right. So it's in terms of interest return. So sometimes volume gives you more profit than individual price points give you, if that makes sense. So I just want people to understand that that's what occurred here, and I'll go into some other material a little bit later that talks about this again. We said we got a minute or so that gets in this a little bit later, but I just wanted you to understand what really was going on here. That this was not a question of banks not having money at all. It was a question of the banks not being able to take money that was that was earning a low interest and turn that into liquid cash so they could sell that money again in other instruments that were paying higher interest. And their inability to be able to solve that problem is what they're talking about when they're blaming, when Biden says, well, we're going to blame these bank officers and these bank presidents. They're the ones who didn't reason this thing out. I'm saying to you that Joe Biden and his people should have reasoned this out and should have prepared the banking industry that this is what's going to occur, and you got to get muscled up to be able to handle it. Right. So I know we got to take a quick break. Hopefully I'm making some kind of sense for those of you in the audience. Please give us a call and let us know what your thoughts are. Our number here again is 716-878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. See you on the other side of the break here at Living for the People on 91.3 FM WBNY.
The sun's shining, birds are singing, and all feels right in the world.
Until the season changes, and suddenly everything seems darker, less lively, and you lose your motivation to get out of bed.
If you struggle with depression, you're not alone. In fact, 1 in 5 people experience some form of depression, and no matter the time of year, it may affect your behavioral or physical ability to live a happy life.
At the American Psychiatric Association Foundation, we understand what you're going through, and we're here to help. Our vision is to build a mentally healthy nation for all, because we want you to live your best life and be your best you all year round. We work every day to eliminate stigma, combat mental illness and substance use disorders, and advance mental wellness.
If you or someone you love needs help, you are not alone. Please visit mentallyhealthynation.org to learn more.
Let's face it, life looks a little different. During these times, we're doing our best to keep our minds and bodies strong. And getting a flu shot helps us stay healthy, so we don't miss out on what matters. Like having game night at home. Yeah, can't do that while sick with the flu. Now imagine family movie night that your daughter can't live without. Well, that's ruined. And don't forget your uncle's socially distanced cookout. See? That's why it's important to be at our strongest. Every year, millions of people in the U.S. get the flu. Especially now, no one has time to miss out on moments that matter. So get your flu shot. Find out more at getmyflushot.org. Brought to you by the AMA, CDC, and the Ad Council.
91.3 FM WBNY is proud to present Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman.
Welcome to Democracy Now!
Award-winning investigative journalism.
Is the NRA imploding?
Providing relevant analysis that makes you think.
Secret State Department documents, including evidence of U.S. war crimes.
Fact-finding reports you will not hear elsewhere. Democracy Now! Airs Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. on 91.3 FM, WBNY, Buffalo.
Tune in 91.3 FM WBNY Mondays 6 p.m. for Mental Health Versus, where Carl Schallahorn mashes up music and mental health in a way you've never heard before. Carl dives into topics such as trauma, depression, and anxiety with compelling guests and captivating music. Mental Health Versus, a show both entertaining and informative. Check out Mental Health Versus Mondays at 6 p.m. on 91.3 FM WBNY.
All right, welcome back to Living for the People. This is L. Nathan here, your host. We're here with Willie H., who does the live streaming of the program. Welcome back, Willie.
Welcome everybody to Living for the People with L. Nathan.
Yeah, he's over there doing some electronic stuff right now, so we couldn't get to the phone that quick. Before I get into my second segment, addressing another aspect of this concern over what's going on in our finance industry, the Ron DeSantis, Paul Gosars, Marjorie Taylor Greene, those people talking about ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance consciousness in making investment decisions on the part of not just banks, but any other company. Before I get into that, I want to give you an example of what the Ron DeSantis type of people are doing to use fake concern for K through 12 educational content to rally what I'm going to refer to as the whites first minority in this country. And went to an article written by Khalida Rahman, Black Man's Removal from School District CRT Event Sparks Chaos. This was in Newsweek magazine yesterday. A California school district workshop on critical race theory became chaotic when a woman apparently told a black man to leave the country. I need for you all to understand that most of the African people, I would say 85% of the African people in the United States, are people who descend from people who have been in the United States since before 1776. Probably 15% of the people in this country, African people in this country, descend from people who were in the United States in 1650. Who is this woman to be telling a black man who's been here forever that he should leave the country when she's the immigrant? And if anybody should be told to leave the country, if at all, it should be her, not him. But my point here is the event came after the Temecula Valley Unified School District's governing board voted to ban the teaching of critical race theory in their schools. Critical race theory is an academic framework, this is the way they defined it in the article in Newsweek, developed by legal scholars that examines America's history through the lens of racism. Although education officials have pointed out that it is not taught in public schools, it has become a catch-all phrase to describe concepts that some conservative legislators find objectionable. In other words, anything that you say that talks about, African people being, materially significant in some evolution of development in the United States, well, we don't want that, because we're the exceptional people, not you. So we don't want you teaching that. Anything you talk about that reflects the role of the oppression of African and Hispanic people in the economic and governance development of the United States, they don't want you to teach that because that would make somebody feel, my great-grandparents did that? Yeah, your grandparents did do that. Some of your great-grandparents, killed people in Ionia, in ancient Greece. Some of your great-great-grandparents, killed people in northern Italy. People kill people over the course of time. Wars happen, oppression happens. You teach about it so that you understand what has happened in the past, so you learn not to do things that would cause that to happen in the future. That's what the purpose of teaching history is really all about. 18 states have imposed bans and restrictions on teaching of critical race theory or on how teachers can discuss racism and sexism in their classrooms. At this workshop that this article referred to, a black member of the public, his name was Dion, stood up to deliver his comments. He said he was deeply disappointed by the board's decision to bring in a panel of so-called experts on critical race theory. He added that critical race theory was not even taught in K through 12 classrooms. Quoting this fellow Dion, he said it is widely recognized by the vast majority of experts that bringing CRT into K through 12 classrooms is just as outlandish as bringing calculus to the first grade classroom. He says neither idea is viable or credible. Therefore, it is, in his words, asinine to ban CRT when it isn't even taught in any K through 12 classroom in the United States. And he says, your continued blatant, willful ignorance of the black experience in this country is not only shameful, but also detrimental to the education and growth of our children. So the school board member of this district is the Temecula Valley School District. His name is Stephen Schwartz. He told Newsweek that as Dion finished speaking and was leaving the podium, a woman stood up and made a comment to the effect that he should get out of the country. And he responded to her, and as he responded to her, the audience became angry. A video of the scene posted on Twitter used with the user who posted in writing, chaos erupted when a trustee tried removing the man, not the racist woman. That's what seems to have caused the uproar. It can be heard in the clip, the woman saying, well, if you feel that way, why don't you get out of the country? If he felt that way about not banning critical race theory, which is not even taught in K through 12 classrooms, he should get out of the country. How does getting out of the country have anything to do with his concern about the educational content that's being discussed in this board meeting? So anyway, she says, get out of the country. She told me to get out of the country. Then he says, now I don't think this is true, but he says, my family's been here since August 16th of 1619. Willie, I don't know, you have more 21st century knowledge than I have, but how would he know that his ancestors got here on August 16th of 1619?
I don't know, sir.
Well, there were 19 African people that were on the boat that came from Jamestown to Jamestown, Virginia, that began the the formal slave trade, international slave trade, or transatlantic slave trade. So maybe he's tracing his origins to that.
All right.
But the school board president, Komrowski, he says, "Sir, that's enough." Saying that his family had been here since 1619, that was too much for the school board president to hear. He says he actually asked for the man to be escorted out of the building. A video posted on TikTok. Maybe that's why they don't want TikTok to be shown anymore. The video posted on TikTok showed sheriff's deputies escorting Dion, the black man, prompting members of the audience to call for the woman to be removed. And they started shouting, "Get her out, get her out." Remember, like, what they call her, hang her up or something like that? They were saying to Hillary Clinton?
Yeah.
Anyway, board member Allison Barkley told Newsweek that she objected to the man's removal. She could be heard saying, "If this woman said that to him, she needs to be excused from the meeting." The woman was later asked to leave, according to Schwartz, the school board president. The meeting devolved into chaos, and the board president declared a recess. In the video, Schwartz is a school board member. Komrowski is the school board president, is heard saying, "We need order in the building, or I'll let everybody leave." So Barkley, who was a school board member, said she asked Komrowski to also remove the woman who had made such a horrible remark. She added, "It's a sad day seeing our community so divided on such a non-issue in our school district that was contrived to push forward a political agenda and distract from our true work, which is providing high-quality education and learning in our award-winning schools." Schwartz, another school board member, said he and another board member left the meeting, prompting the audience to start chanting, "No quorum, no meeting." After several minutes, the board president said that a third board member would be returning and the meeting would continue. They contacted Dion, the black man, for comment and emailed the members of the school board district's governing board. Note that the school board meeting ultimately continued, and the woman who insulted the black man, she was allowed to remain in the meeting. Her right to participate was preserved. The black man was forced to leave the meeting, and his right to participate in this public meeting was eviscerated.
Wow.
Just want you to understand, this is what Ron DeSantis is all about. When you all start voting to elect him because you say, well, he's a stand-up guy, he's concrete, he's down to earth, he's not an elite. Yeah, he is an elite. He went to Yale or Harvard, one of those two schools and whatnot, and he's built his resume off of that brand, that he's smarter than everybody else, right? Pay attention. Let me go real quickly to this discussion about Ron DeSantis and this grouping of people who are blaming Silicon Valley's collapse on what they refer to as ESG policies. And when they say ESG policies, they mean environmentally oriented or sensitive, socially sensitive, and governance sensitive policies at these larger firms, not just banks, but firms across the country. He said the investing world is being drawn into culture wars and hit by a conservative backlash to something called wokeism. Now, Will, I know you being, more modern, getting into the world a lot later in the world than I got into the world. Mm-hmm. You probably even know what wokeism means, right?
I think wokeism means that woke to what's going on racially, culturally, and some of the things that's going on behind the scenes, the system, the way it's set up. Is that what wokeism means? Well,
according to them, they say wokeism is a loosely defined concept that conservative critics use to describe policies related to climate action and diversity initiatives. It began as being an alert to racial prejudice and discrimination, but it's been transmuted by the Republicans as referring to any broad awareness of social inequalities such as sexism, any broad awareness of climate change, any broad awareness of inclusiveness and governance of your society. So for the conservatives, it would be better if you had no women and no black, brown, Asian, Native American. Don't have any of them, on any of your boards. Don't have any of them being the heads or vice, presidents or deputies
Right.
or CEOs of your companies, and keep them in pocket communities. All you brown people go live over here.
Right.
All you black people go live over here.
Or put them in jail somewhere.
Exactly. Okay. And for white folks, if they do something wrong, find out what the mental health problem was and give them medicine.
Right.
And if black people do something wrong, hang them by their toes.
And we have seen that.
Yep.
We've seen it.
This is the United States that we've come to know, right?
Yeah. Well,
not necessarily to love, but we came to know.
They want all of us to be ignorant. Only those people who make the money and people who rule over everybody else ignorant, and we'll just the undesirables somehow kill them off, put them in jail, or put them in communities where they have to suffer.
Until we need to pick some crops.
Right.
Then wake them up.
Right.
Kill them. Then wake them up, and plant and whatever they do, horticulture, and then reap the crops, and then go back down in the ground again and stay there until we call you back. Right. So House Oversight Committee Chairperson James Comer, Republican from Kentucky, he calls Silicon Valley Bank one of the most woke banks because of its ESG-type policies, a reference to environmental, social, and corporate governance driven investing that has been embraced by, hundreds of billions of dollar type companies all across the world. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, he says that Silicon Valley's diversity, equity, and inclusion requirements diverted them from focusing on their core mission, because their core mission is to make money. And, diversity, that doesn't make you money. Equity doesn't make you money. Inclusion doesn't make you money. So they should not be focusing on that. Now, here's what they meant by diversity. They had one white woman on the board. That was a diversity issue, right? They had, I don't even know what they meant by equity and inclusion, but they had developed a program at the bank where they were doing mortgages in low and middle income communities that had large populations of people of color in those communities. Mm-hmm. Now, I just want you to wrap your mind around this for just a second. Banks get their money to work with, to invest, from depositors who are savers or checking account holders in their community. Mm-hmm. Normally, if you live in Poughkeepsie, you don't drive all the way to Buffalo, right, to put your money in the bank. You put your money in a bank in Poughkeepsie. Right. So most of your depositors are people that are very local to the physical site of that bank.
That's correct.
So when they're making investments in communities, it makes sense that the communities who are putting their money into the bank should get some benefit in terms of the investments that the bank makes in the communities being served by that money. Mm-hmm. So you would expect that a significant amount of or portion of a bank's mortgages would be mortgages for people that were buying homes in the communities where people lived who were putting the deposits into the bank. Mm-hmm. But according to Ron DeSantis, well, that's equity. And we're not into that. We're just into, profit. Mm-hmm. And banks shouldn't be thinking, like that. Mm-hmm. So it's okay for banks to think about putting money, investments in communities that are well-to-do communities, around their regional area. That's good to do. Mm-hmm. And if you can't do your investments there, you could actually do your investments someplace else. I came across, this is many years ago, that M&T Bank actually was the name of a stadium in Baltimore.
Wow!
And Baltimore, it's like a headquarters of M&T Bank in Baltimore, Yet M&T Bank was prima donna, primo number one, here in Buffalo.
Yeah,
So
that's where my money's at.
how does that happen? It happens because M&T Bank is getting depositor money from people in Buffalo, but it was investing the depositor monies in backing loans that were being made in Baltimore to help build up Baltimore.
Wow.
But you couldn't get the same kind of loans, from investors in Buffalo to finance, building construction and commercial, business initiatives and whatnot in Buffalo.
Mr. Hare, I have noticed through the years that there's loans in other parts of the country, but when you reside in New York, they won't give you a loan, or you won't have that same option.
Because they want to put the loans where they think the loans are going to have the best chance to mature, right, and they're going to get the interest rates that they want, from those loans. And I understand that you want to have safety on your investments and you want to get as much return on your investment as you can. But it seems to me that you should be able to do that in the community that you are physically resident in.
Right.
You wouldn't necessarily go 1,100 miles away to invest money from me in Buffalo, someplace 1,100 miles away, and not be doing at least as much of that kind of investment in and around Buffalo. Right. So that's what this social and equity and governance principle is. And there's no government regulation that says that you're required to do X amount of stuff that meets a social test or an equity test or a governance test. The regulation that's in the structure of the Department of Labor, it merely says that you should look at those things and have some evidence that you were looking at those things and paying attention when you were making your investment decisions. In other words, if we're not asking you to tear up all your investments right now, but if tomorrow morning you're going to invest $10 million of dollars that say shake loose from your investments in treasury bonds or your investments in commercial loans or your investment in mortgages and so on, you got $10 million that comes loose because these things have matured, that you would think about, well, how can I use that money in a way that would give me a similar return on investment, but do it in and around Buffalo, right? That's what that ESG sensitivity is all about. So the reactions from prominent GOP members come amid a conservative backlash to something called wokeism that we just defined. This environment, social, and governance sensitivity has become a flashpoint in Republican-controlled state legislatures in Congress. Earlier this month, Congress voted to overturn a Biden administration rule that lets retirement plan managers consider a company's environmental and social decisions before investing in it. So it's a bad thing for you to say, well, before I do a commercial loan, with your great big company that's going to put $100 million worth of commerce in your area, I need to know whether or not you're going to take care of the people that live in your area. Are they going to get jobs?
Right.
Are they going to be able to do business with you? Are you going to sell stuff, to them, right? But Ron DeSantis says, no, you shouldn't be doing that. So President Biden on March 20th vetoed the bill that the Republicans had put together to try to retire the administrative rule that lets retirement plan managers consider a company's environmental and social decisions before investing in it. And Republicans refer to this as woke capitalism, and has now become a hot button issue in what we know about ESG. The acronym ESG measurements represents measurements that some investors, not everyone, but some investors use to assess a company's environmental, social, and corporate governance decisions. The E stands for environment, how well a company treats the environment and works to reduce its carbon footprint. Why would we want to pay attention to that? We should have companies that are increasing their carbon footprint, not decreasing their carbon footprint, because that's where the money is, right? S stands for social. or how well a company treats its labor force, its communities, and its clients, its workplace safety history, its employee diversity, and whether or not its products are safe. Why would you want to make sure that companies are investing in products and services that are safe, that aren't killing people? We shouldn't be doing that. We should kill people. That's what we do, right? The G stands for governance, or how well a company holds itself accountable. For example, a company's accounting practices and executive compensation decisions. Like Donald Trump's company, that said that, well, this property on, Park Avenue, it's really a 100 and I think it's 110, 120,000 square foot apartment, and it's worth $1.5 billion. And when they came and they looked at the apartment, it was a 33,000 square foot apartment, and it was worth $500 million. That's a big difference, right? Those are accounting practices. Well, according to Ron DeSantis, those are creative accounting practices, and that should be okay. Right? So it's this sort of stuff, right? So J.P. Morgan, for example, as an ESG conscious company, stopped lending to new coal mines or coal-fired power plants because he's saying this is the stuff that we should be ending. We shouldn't be doing new stuff like this. If we're going to do something new, it should be wind power. It should be geothermal. Right. It should be solar power. Right. It should be tidal power, and so on. Larry Fink, who is the chief executive of BlackRock, he pushed back against these claims that his company is pushing a liberal agenda. He says, we're not doing liberal stuff. He says, we focus on sustainability, not because we're environmentalists, but because we're capitalists and fiduciaries to our clients. In other words, we're doing what's in the interest of our clients. Doesn't matter whether you think it's woke or not. We don't care about that. We care about what our clients want, because that's who we sell to. And so, what was it? In 2021, global asset managers controlled something in the area of $18.4 trillion in what they refer to as ESG-related assets, which they projected that number was going to grow to $34 trillion by 2026, 3 years from today. In 2020, an estimated 85% of investors use environment, social, and governance measurements in their investments. So what's the point? Some investors use ESG purely to evaluate how certain environmental and social conditions might impact the bottom line. He says that they're looking at ways in which climate, labor practices, and human rights are going to affect the profits and losses. According to Witold Heinitz, the vice dean of the University of Pennsylvania's ESG initiative. He says, so the goal is just to do good investing. Denise Whalen, the director of New York University's Stern Center for Sustainable Business, was where we got that information from. She said companies that don't embrace sustainability are going to end up like companies that don't embrace digitalization. You were talking about that a little bit earlier. You could be afraid of, dislike, it's too woke, to digitalize your data operations. Right. But 10 years later, you would have been out to lunch. You would have been able to compete, in the market if you hadn't done that. Right. ESG critics contend that it is liberal policymaking disguised as business decisions. As they see it, companies have chosen or are being pressured to adopt liberal policies rather than serving their investors' best interests. This is according to Representative Garland Barr, who called ESG a cancer on our capital markets. So who are the people that oppose ESG? Well, you got people like a group of 25 Republican state attorney generals who sued the Labor Department to block the rule requiring you to consider ESG. Republican officials in Florida, Texas, and other states have sought to bar their state governments from doing business with banks that use ESG in investing. So you can see that it is the Republicans who are using opposition to ESG as a policymaking process, as opposed to making business decisions. The conservative battle against woke banks is starting to backfire. In Republican strongholds such as North Dakota, Indiana, Mississippi, and Kentucky, legislators have voted down proposals to prevent state governments or pension funds from doing business with firms that have adopted an ESG policy framework. When they talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, this describes policies of employers that believe fostering a diverse and inclusive workforce will create long-term financial benefits. In late February, for example, the New College of Florida, we talked about them a few times before, voted to abolish its office that oversees the school's diversity and equity initiative investments. So, what he says here? In August of 2022, Silicon Valley Bank detailed its sustainable investing efforts, including an $11.2 billion community benefits plan that included small business loans and a mortgage program for lower income home buyers. It also detailed a $5 billion program to provide financing to support its client sustainability business. Because they did that, when Silicon Valley got in trouble because of these treasury bonds and whatnot, guess who stepped up to help them? The community that they were investing in stepped up to help them, put pressure on the politicians to get them to do something to support Silicon Valley Bank. There's no evidence, just quick last point, there is no evidence at all that Silicon Valley's sustainable investing or diversity initiatives contributed to its collapse. Experts have instead pointed to a perfect storm of Silicon Valley Bank's significant holdings in U.S. Treasuries and Federal Reserve interest rate hikes. As the Fed raised interest rates, Silicon Valley's bond holdings became less valuable, and the bank sold treasuries and mortgage-backed securities at a $1.8 billion loss. The disclosure sparked panic with depositors, who then pulled $42 billion of their deposits away from Silicon Valley. So I just want you to understand that that's making the point that I was making the earlier part of the program. You can see that this is not something that I just conjectured, but that this is what was actually going on. There's other stuff that we can talk about, but I just wanted us to get a little bit of understanding of what's going on, with Silicon Valley, with the banking industry, and with these Ron DeSantis type people.
Thank you, Mr. Hare.
And what it means. We look forward to talking to you all on Monday. Have a really great weekend. Hopefully we'll have a couple more degrees, maybe get 45-degree weather on, part of the day. Maybe we can get the winds to slow down from 60 miles an hour to 30 miles an hour, and let's have a really great weekend. Thank you all for looking forward to talking to you all on Monday here at Living for the People in 91.3 FM WBNY. We'll see you all then.